Right, good evening, everyone. Thank you all for attending this. We really appreciate it. Sorry, I'm just admitting everyone. There's people coming into the lobby now. Thank you so much for your interest in this webinar. Myself and Martin really honoured and proud that so many people have shown interest in this and got involved with what we're trying to do here. So thank you so much. We understand, how important everyone's time is. So thanks again so much. We are so happy to have everyone here. There is a chat facility going on. So if you've anything you'd like to, any questions you'd like to ask, anything you'd like to comment on, Martin will, can answer the chat questions at the end. Sorry if I feel distracted, but I'm just trying to admit all the people that are coming into this. There's quite a few now at the minute. So yeah, so thank you so much. Really appreciate it. What we're trying to do is raise the awareness of mental health in football and use football to open discussions around mental health. For us tonight to have Martin speaking, we're so proud to have one of the UK's leading experts on mental health, the lived mental health experience. Martin's story is powerful, it's poignant, and it will make us all think about maybe what we can do moving forward with our teams, our staff, our colleagues, our friends, our family. So yeah, I will hand over to Martin. I will continue to let people into the meeting as they're just coming in droves now. So again, thank you so much for attending, and over to you, Martin.
Thank you, Dan, and hopefully you can see my slides, which is always a good start. So I hope you can see that slide in front of you. First of all, thank you, Dan, for inviting me along today. I suppose I probably want to start off a little bit about, a warning message right at the very front of this presentation. So I've got to be talking for about 45 minutes, but I'm going to be talking about suicidal ideation and my own personal mental health journey. So if there's anybody on the call who finds that difficult, then please, don't think you need to put your cameras on. If you want to take that time away, then that is absolutely fine, because I'm also going to be showing a video as well, which touches on that particular subject. So my name is Martin Roberts. I'm founder of Keeping Mind Limited, but I'm also actually the mental health lead within Lloyds Banking Group. And I'm going to be talking for the next 45 minutes around my own personal journey, but it's probably more than that. And for me, it's not about my journey. It's more about what I put in place to get me through that other side. And hopefully by the end of this evening, you'll be able to take away maybe some of those hints, tips, techniques that maybe help support yourself, people within your club, or even friends and family. But it's got to be uncomfortable. But I'm also a great believer that to become comfortable, we have to first become uncomfortable. And it may be uncomfortable this next 45 minutes or so, but hopefully by the end of tonight, if it gives people that permission to do the most two important things anybody can ever do, and that is 2 steps, 3 words, I need help, then hopefully then we've served a purpose this evening. The greatest glory in living lies not in never falling, but rising every time we fall. And that's a famous quote by the famous Nelson Mandela. And I fell many years ago, and we may have people on this call tonight who have fallen, not literally, but hypothetically fallen with their own mental health, their physical health, or even their emotional well-being. But I'm a great believer that sometimes we don't realise the amount of resilience that we have, or the amount of resilience that we can learn from those challenging periods. And the last two years have been challenging on a number of many different fronts. And I'm a great believer that now we don't live in this perfect world that we probably thought we lived in pre-pandemic. And I'll touch around some of that perfectionism, and I'll also touch around how perfectionism can actually be inhibiting to our personal lives, or even our professional lives. And that could be in our careers, but it's all called that perfectionism. It can be on the football pitch, it can be within clubs, it can be within societies. How we always strive to be that perfect individual. So a bit about me. So I'm born in Halifax, West Yorkshire. The picture there on the top left-hand corner in the shorts is me, which is a horrendous picture. Married, 2 children, got a 27-year-old and a 17-year-old. And football's been part and parcel of our life for many years. I never went to university. I mean, I wasn't academically minded, I suppose, to go to university. I was brought up in a working class family. Football, secondary school, that was for me, that was my life to a certain extent at a young age. And then I went into inshore banking. And I suppose 1989, when I was making those career choices, I think it was always said insurance or banking were the right places to go. So I worked at Halifax, then Lloyds Banking Group, and I've been there 30 odd years. In the last 5 years, I've been doing the mental health lead role. And for me, that is the most important, best job I've ever had. And I'll explain how that all came about in a few moments. And now my role is not just within as a mental health lead within LBG, but I now go out to do talks to schools, organisations, just like we're doing tonight. And I show my vulnerability, and I show, I suppose, a bit of authenticity that I have personal lived experience, and I've not got that from a textbook or from reading loads of books. I've been there. I've been at the very bottom of that ladder. And why? Because I put on many, many masks of pretense. I hid away from, I suppose, what was happening in my life. And I'll show in a few moments to how that really was detrimental to my personal life, absolutely, but also my professional life as well. And that picture then, top right-hand corner, that's a picture of me which I didn't know was taken at the time, and that was at Hillsborough, which obviously I'll share that story in a few moments, and how that event and a number of other events then came crashing down around me one morning in the summer of 2017. You might think, why on earth is there a pair of brown shoes on that slide in front of you? And by chance, I've actually got those same shoes here today. And whenever I do a talk or presentation, I wear these same shoes. And I'm going to talk about my own personal story, where it began. And I start from a position that we have all got a story to tell. I don't care who we are, we all have a story to tell. And I'm not here to give you my sob story, because we all go through storms in our lives, and we're all going through a lot of storms right now. And I'm going to share around my own personal story, but we might have people on this call tonight who've gone through some of their own events. It can be things like, I don't know, losing a pet or stress at work, whatever it may be, it's your story. But it's our emotional response to how we handle that reaction, how we handle that situation, how we may want to say, you know, I need a bit of help. But for whatever reason, there's always something that's stopping us in asking for that help. So I'm going to talk about my personal journey. So we're going to talk a few months about that suicide ideation. And like I said before, ignore the person that's talking in front of you today. For me, it's the most important thing is the messages. That's what I want to get across. So I mentioned before about how comfortable we have in those mental health conversations. You know, people don't want to get involved. People don't want to open Pandora's box. It's not my problem to sort out. And I was that person back in 2017. I didn't want to talk about mental health. I didn't certainly want to talk it with my friends, my family, or people within the workplace. But what would you do? Would you walk towards, or would you walk away from somebody? And like I said before, I've admitted I've walked away from people pre-2017 because of the stigma, the shame. I didn't want to get involved in people's problems. But we have to realise that we cannot keep walking away from this problem. We have to walk towards. We have to somehow create an environment, be it in the workplace, in clubs or societies, that people feel safe to say, I need some help, I need some guidance. And that's just not the people playing on the football pitch. That could be the managers, it could be people within a clubhouse. Mental health or poor mental health don't discriminate against individuals. It can impact anyone at any certain time. And like I said before, we have to sometimes become uncomfortable to absolutely then become comfortable when we're talking about something so distressing as that can be. But would you know what signs to look out for if somebody in your club is struggling with poor mental health? Is it physical signs? Is it sometimes the words they use or the actions that they sometimes portray? And I was that person. I didn't know the signs to look out for. I didn't know what people would be impacted by poor mental health. But what I've learned from my own journey is we have to go on that journey. But most importantly is what can we put in place to help and support individuals who are struggling with their poor mental health. My mental health journey, I know the day, the time, the place that my poor mental health started impacting me. And as you can see in the picture there, that was the 15th of April, 1989 at 3:06. And I'm going to show a newsreel in a few moments to, I suppose, to show the gravity of what happened on that day. And we've probably got, well, we have got people on this call who maybe have been close to that situation, may have had people there, or even obviously was just aware of that event on that day. And then got to talk around the day as I experienced it as an 18-year-old person. And the reason why I show this video and talk about it is I have to somehow bring people to that event in that time so they realise the significance of what happened on that day. But then more importantly, I'll share my journey around what challenge I faced with, but then what I had to put in place to overcome some of these personal battles. So I'm going to show the video now. Fingers crossed this will play okay.
We must go now to Hillsborough. What looks anyway to be a major incident there. Peter Jones.
The teams have just left the field here. The trouble away to our left, where there's a packed enclosure of Liverpool supporters. 2.5 minutes after the match started, they really came over the top of the fence. Police are trying desperately hard to hold them back, and at the moment it is simple mayhem.
The police just said, just go through. You open the gate, just go in. It doesn't matter about the tickets.
They weren't interested. They didn't say who's got tickets and who hasn't. They just opened the gate and let anybody in.
We heard the policeman say, we've opened the gate, there's going to be people killed outside. It was just like a mass relief. Little did we know that when we got under the barrier, the sheer weight of supporters that were trying to get in for kick-off just carried you.
I should stress, incidentally, not so much a question of crowd trouble here. It's just that they were packed in far too tight, went over the top, people got frightened. They're then trying to climb up, as they are now, into the upper tier, which is very, very dangerous indeed.
The crush didn't stop. They were screaming for them to rip the fence down or do something. These two people's arms that were on the floor were just coming up, grasping for life, literally, and you were still being crushed yourself, but you were trying to hold them up.
Situation now seems to be becoming a lot more serious. An ambulance has just come into the stadium and it's making its way through a vast crowd of people away to the left. There would seem to be, from where I'm sitting here, dozens of people now lying on the ground and being attended to by police and St John's ambulance.
Go, like the advertisement stanchions, we ran it to the back of the goal and we carried the dead bodies out, then after I'd done that, I went to the stands and they were saying there was only 2 dead and it was terrible because I walked in and I seen 40 at least dead.
I ask you to stay in the stadium, to remain in the stadium just for a few minutes until we can get rid of all the injured people. As soon as we've got rid of all the injured people safe into the hospitals, we won't be able to do that if you rush out of the ground. We'll let you know and you can leave the stadium in safety. Please, it's a very difficult situation for all concerned. Please don't panic. Try and be calm, and we're doing our best for you.
There's a young girl in front of me who was pushed so hard against this bloke in front because she was short. She was suffocating in this bloke's shirt in the back. All I saw of her head was her hair, her nose and her eyes.
Away to the left, the corner flag. I see for the last 10 minutes a nurse has what I think been giving a kiss of life to one young fan who looks in deep distress. There must be at least another 20 or 30 lying on the ground calling for it.
So I'm sorry I had to show it in some respects, but I had to somehow bring that event to people's living rooms, their offices tonight. And I'm going to talk around my day of that day, and then I'm going to talk around what then led up to the decision I took, which I've had to live with for the rest of my life. So I was an 18-year-old season ticket holder, followed Liverpool for many years, both home and abroad. It was a lovely Saturday morning, 15th of April 1989. It was a bright sunny day. I remember it clear as day. Went to the match with my uncle. We stopped off for a drink. Yes, we stopped off for a drink, and there was a lot of noise made around fans going for a drink. Got to the gate in about 2:30, I think it was. Went to turnstiles and went through Leppings Lane, through Pensy, and you can see the football pitch in front of you. And I automatically went to, because I could see that pitch. And as I went into the stadium, it started getting busy. And I've been in many stadiums where it was busy, but somehow this felt different. It felt uncomfortable. And I suddenly started to realise that I needed to get out. There was a turnstile, there's a barrier in front of me, and this almighty crack just snapped in front of me, and I realised then I had to somehow fight for my own life. I managed to climb onto somebody, and I lived with this for the rest of my life as a father, as a husband, that I had to climb over men, women and children for me to survive that day. And I was one of the first people that managed to get over the fence. You then go into this mode of trying to do whatever you can, and as an 18-year-old, I don't think I'd ever seen a dead body. I don't think I'd ever seen an accident or events. Obviously, there've never been events like Hillsborough, but people really suffering. I know it's that mode whereby to try and help support people, putting on board hoardings, and there's a massive gymnasium at the back of the stadium. We're taking people back there, lying them down, not knowing if they were alive or dead. unbeknown now, of course, we all know the people were alive as we were taken back into that gymnasium. And then about 6 o'clock, I then thought, I need to get home. I need to let my parents know that I was alive, because they knew that I was at the football stadium. We didn't have mobile phones then, so I couldn't get hold of my parents. And I suppose there is where my journey started. The Sunday morning, I was walking around the garden, didn't speak to anybody. And I realised then that, well, what do I do? I was, many miles away from Liverpool in Halifax, nobody to talk to. And I started thinking, well, I need to speak to somebody, but I didn't know who that person would be. And 1989, we didn't talk about mental health. I was brought up in the family whereby unless you had a broken arm, broken leg, you went to work, it was okay. 2 days later, I went to work on the Tuesday morning, was back at work. People thought they knew what was best for me. I still had my physical health. I wasn't struggling, I suppose, that visibly for people to see. But that's the attitude we were brought up in back in 1989. Of course, mental health was there, poor mental health was there, but we certainly didn't talk about it in my family or even in society in general. And I suppose I was probably ashamed, of what people were saying, what the press was saying, the magnitude of the event. And I got questions from other people when I went to workplace. Did you see what they write in the paper? I mean, for Christ's sake, no, it did not happen. And I felt very alone. Well, I suppose, no, I'll rephrase that. Sorry, I chose to be alone. I felt comfortable in my own company. But then it went through a period whereby, you start going through your life, obviously the inquiries, etc. And I had to somehow, I suppose, put it back in my mind. I will never go from my mind, but somehow put it back in my mind and try to somehow get on with my life, as difficult as that could be. And I found that I started isolating myself from friends and family. And during a period of time, many years you go through, you have your children, you get married, etc. I started to throw myself into work. And for many, many years, Hillsborough's always got to be there, but it always will be there. I somehow had to put that to one side. And I started going through a period whereby, work was, I suppose, the be all and end all. And I was suffering, absolutely, I was suffering. And I don't, I suppose, apologise for the fact that I used to fake illnesses, so I didn't have to socialise with friends or family. And work was becoming my haven. Work was my escapism to get away from the questions I was getting asked at home around, are you okay, Matt? Every time there's a Hillsborough anniversary, I'd always get asked those questions. And it prevented me from moving on. And I became, I suppose, depressed. I didn't even know actually what the word depression was, to be quite frank, but I found myself struggling. And then about 2017, my wife was diagnosed with a bone tumour. My dad was diagnosed with cancer, and 2 years prior to that, my mother died of dementia. Hillsborough inquiries were still ongoing. I thought, oh, shit, I can manage this. I can spin all these many, many different plays. And I had 2 masks of pretense. I had one at home and I had one at work. And suddenly I started to realise that I couldn't start spinning these plays. I couldn't start being the husband, the career professional, the father. And I wasn't a nice person to be around, not just within the home place, but even at work. And loneliness started to consume me. But was I going to tell people I needed help? Absolutely not. Why? I'm a man. I'm a career professional. I'm a husband. And this was my problem to sort out. It certainly wasn't my wife's problems, my children's problems, or other people's to sort out. It was my problem to sort out. And I was also worried about what would happen within my career as well. Would it inhibit my career as I move forward? So I started to convince myself that I was becoming that burden on everybody around me, but strangely not working. That will become evident in a few moments. And as a 48-year-old, I felt useless, I felt helpless, and I feel as if I had no purpose in life. And I always craved routine, I craved control. But one other thing I also craved, and we talked about at the very beginning of this presentation, that was perfectionism. I was that perfect individual, both at home and at work. And we've all seen the last 2-3 years, we do not live in a perfect world anymore, but yet we continue to try to think to be the perfect individual, be it home or within the workplace. And I started feeling worthless, and I started becoming worthless, or I thought at least I was. And I was quickly running out of options of what I could do and what I could put in place. Was I going to ask for help? Absolutely, I wasn't. But I was becoming physically, mentally, and emotionally exhausted with what would happen with my family, what had happened with Hillsborough, still trying to manage a career. I was becoming absolutely exhausted. And one thing one of the biggest causes of poor mental health is poor sleep. I was struggling with my sleep. I would be getting 3-4 hours of sleep per night. I would be getting up in the morning, 4ish, and I'd be going to work at 4:30 in the morning. Again, it was my escapism. And then something strange happened one night. And sometimes people think, this is a bit up here, but it is absolutely true. I attended my own funeral. I lied in bed and I walked that walk. I considered all the words that I've talked about, the burden, useless, worthless. And I felt as if I had no choices. And I craved routine. I craved choices in life. I felt those had all been taken away from me. And I'm the first person to always admit that whenever I've ever heard somebody's considered taking their own life or then taken their own life, I would sometimes say, how selfish can that person be? What about their family? What about the people that they leave behind? But when you're in that moment in your life where you feel you have no choices, you become that burden, it becomes an easy decision to make. So I looked at what people would say if they were at my funeral, looking from the outside in. What would people got to say that if I wasn't there? And for the first time ever in many, many years, I felt at peace with myself. I absolutely felt at peace with myself. 30th of August 2017, early hours. I got that morning, I got dressed. I got dressed to go take my own life. I knew where I was going to go because I planned it that night before. I knew where I was going to drive and what I was going to do. And people sometimes say to me now, would you follow through with it? And I'm a great believer that when you get asked a question, you might not know the answer, but you can maybe go find the answer. That's one question I can never give the answer to. I was determined. I had to take some choices. I had to take back control and routine of my life. My wife woke up, and why to this very day we'll never know why she woke up, but she woke up and came downstairs and asked me where I was going. And I told her, I can't take this anymore. I need to remove myself from you, from the family, from everybody, because I've become that burden. And I did that morning on the 30th of August 2017, I did the two most important things I will ever do. I took 2 steps. I said 3 simple words, I need help. And if we've got people on this call who are parents or guardians of children, you always remember your child's first steps or your child's first words as being probably the most important things as a parent or a guardian. That morning were the most important things I have ever done. But they were not simple. Oh my God, they were not simple. And throughout that morning, we sat down, I crumpled in front of my wife, I told everything that was going on in my own mind, and I admitted that, I really needed some of that help. I did something else strange that afternoon. After I got myself composed and we were talking to my wife, that afternoon, I went into work. I mean, Christ almighty, a few hours before, I was getting dressed to go out and take my own life. Later on in that afternoon, I got dressed to go into work. And the reason for that is I had to somehow get acceptance that work was my solace, work was my escapism. I somehow need to get acceptance from my employers, my workplace, that what I was going through was okay. Went to work and I broke down. My manager at the time, she marched me to the doctors. I went to the doctors and I was then put into crisis care that afternoon, that evening. My wife was told to lock the doors, so I couldn't escape, I couldn't get out of the house. And the crisis team came out to see me. And they said to me, you need help. We need to admit you for a day or so. And I would absolutely love to know where was I going to go into hospital. But I suppose common sense prevailed. I was admitted to a mental health hospital. The same mental health hospital I drive past day in, day out. And I've always used to say to myself, August 2017, I wonder what type of person goes in there. Psychotic people, nutters, OCD, mad people. Yeah, I've absolutely used those words. And ironically now, I found myself sat on a bed, mesh on windows, no rails, no mirrors, on a really basic ward. Placed on suicide watch, even going to the garden there, I had somebody with me. First few days was hard, and I started to think, I can't cope with this. I made a further attempt on my life whilst in that mental health hospital. And then I did the third most important thing I probably have ever done. I started to make choices. I hypothetically put my hand out for help, and I made two choices. I could either carry on the way that I was going, and that certainly wouldn't end favourably, or I could be accepting of all the help and the support that was available. And for the first time in a many years, I started to be kind to myself. A 48-year-old career professional, a man, a husband, a father, was got to put himself first. I've got to start to be kind to myself. So I went through all the medication with like an all-inclusive. I had CBT, EMDR, psychiatrist treatment, and I was eventually diagnosed with post-traumatic PTSD, or post-traumatic stress disorder, as a result of Hillsborough, because I've not faced into it. I've put it away, and obviously what had happened with family, etc. But what I found hard was to try and handle the stigma, the shame that a Roberts family member has now found himself in the Dales Mental Health Hospital. But I had to somehow overcome that stigma, overcome that label for me to move on. And I talk about the brown shoes. When I was in that mental health hospital, my wife threw away all the clothes that I wore that morning, except for the shoes that I wore. Why, we'll never know. And for me, they are the most important personal possession I now have. Why? Because there is, I suppose, to give that sense of the path that I was going to walk that morning, but more importantly, the path that I now walk day in, day out. And that's to talk on sessions like this, to try and move the stigma, the shame, call it what you want, that comes with mental health and well-being, or poor mental health, especially when it comes to males. So they're my simple reminder of, I suppose, who I am now as I go forward. I can't change the past. Of course, I would love to have changed the past to a certain extent. I can't. Hillsborough and what happened with family will always be there. I class myself as a lucky one. 97 people were to look at, 97 families, friends, associates, work colleagues have lost dear people. So I can't change the past. But what I can do, I suppose, is try to shape that as I move forward. It's part of my DNA. It's something I have to live with, something I have to try somehow turn into a positive way. I regularly drive past the place where I was going to end it all with, and sometimes my wife might be sat next to me, and I always get this sense of looking at me. I know she's dying to say certain things or say something. And there's that trust element that will always be there from the challenges or the personal journey that I went on to. So that's the journey where I ended up with my poor mental health. But what I want to do, and I said it right at the very beginning, this is not just me to give you my personal journey and how it's ended today. What I also want to try and leave you with is something around the support tools, the techniques that I had to put in place. Not, it was a case of shoulda, shunta. I had to put in place to get me back onto my road of recovery. And I'm going to demonstrate now, however, that poor mental health is not one size fits all. Yes, we have training booklets, we can go on course, we can get those certificates. But poor mental health is not one size fits all. We cannot write a manual to, around what people should do to support people's well-being. It's how we approach it. It's how we create a safe psychological environment that people in football clubs can say, I'm struggling, I need a bit of help, without the fear of a label being stuck to them, without the fear of that stigma, without fear of what other people are thinking. I'm going to show now around what did I put in place to support my well-being as I went through that particular journey. But how can we get beyond fine? And I will never ever apologize for the fact that a well-being conversation, embarking on a well-being conversation, discussing, having that conversation with somebody might not be life-changing for a person. It can absolutely be life-saving for them. And as fellow club members, well, no, actually, as human beings, we have a right to be inquisitive. We have a right to care about the people within our clubs or societies, within our organisations. Some people might say to me, well, it's being intrusive, it's being nosy. No, it's not. It's being caring. But how do we care? How can we approach that subject? And there's 4 key themes I'm going to touch on in a few moments around how we shouldn't struggle in silence. How can we reach out? How can we make those life-changing decisions? And how, if somebody is struggling, how can we help them get beyond that word "I'm fine"? And all you'll see here today is everything around what I personally went through. But we have to remember, words can feel like labels. Once we start using words like mental, straitjacket, psycho, lunatic, or even OCD, I know we may not say it with harmful intent, but for a person suffering from one of those conditions, it can be absolutely debilitating when we use them, for example, OCD. And yeah, I've said to you before, these are the exact words I used pre-2017. But we have to realise of the detrimental impact it has on that person. It's not just their well-being, but also on their confidence in their personal lives or their professional lives. And we talked around perfectionism, even imposter syndrome, that's playing a massive impact on people's well-being. So we have to remember words, as much as they may not be intentional what we use or what we say, it can mean so much to a person listening or even a person who's just listening on the outside. A well-being conversation, though, how can we engage in that conversation? How can we create an environment in a club, a society, an organisation, or even in the household? This is not just restricted to football clubs or within a company or organisation. This is all about creating that environment within the household as well. And there's 4 areas that got me through and got me onto that road to recovery. And that's around when having that conversation, it's around being empathetic. It's visualising what it would be like to walk in that person's shoes. If we know somebody's struggling, how can we put ourselves in that position, even if it's for 10 seconds, a minute? Can we visualise what it is like to walk in that person's shoes? And empathy is not sympathy. Absolutely not. Empathy is not sympathy. Empathy is feeling with that person. It's feeling what they're going through. Just as my line manager went through with me and my family gone through with me, it's absolutely feeling with that individual. And it's using simple words, hey, I'm on your side. And I'm going to touch on a few moments around the importance of that conversation, how to try find those right words. Because I know how difficult it can be to engage in a conversation. And sometimes there's that fear of, what do I say? How do I even approach that subject? I'm frightened of what they're going to tell me. I'm frightened that I'm not equipped to give that person that help and that support. And people sometimes think I'm a bit mad when they say, we're having a well-being conversation. But one of the most important things in having a well-being conversation, I know this sounds really the complete opposite, the power of silence. We sometimes feel obliged in those awkward moments of silence that we have to fill it with something, because we have to make it, we're listening, we have to fill those awkward moments. But power of silence is that person might want to be listened to, nothing more, nothing less, and it can absolutely be life-saving. But how do we approach, how do we engage that environment where they can have that conversation? Are we truly sensitive, though, to the person's needs and the individual's needs? How can we create that right environment? And we have to realise that, somebody in a club or in a football club or even an organisation, if they're reaching out to you and doing what I did on that 30th of August 2017, that's 2 steps, 3 words, and they're not simple words, trust me, I need help. Are we creating that right environment that we can then get them that help? Are we even creating that right environment that they're able to do the 2 steps and say those 3 words? But when we're listening to their challenges, are we listening without assuming? Because sometimes I think we have this great gift of, we think we have the answers to everything. And sometimes we'll say things or put things in place because we assume that's what they need. But is that what they really need? And I keep going back to the COVID and pandemic. We're in a totally different world to where we were pre-March 2020. And sometimes we go through life and assuming that certain individuals need certain things to help their mental health and well-being. But sometimes we have to do the most powerful thing we can ever do, and it absolutely costs nothing. It's free. That's listen and have a conversation And don't be afraid of that silence. It can be so, so powerful. I think sometimes we get hung up on, I need to help and support individuals within a club or society. It's got to take me weeks to get things in place. No, it doesn't. This can take absolutely seconds and minutes. And like I said before, it's not life-changing. For some people, it can absolutely be life-saving. But we have to be genuine. We have to be genuine in the help and support that we're going to give. And an authentic life begins first with getting honest with yourself, and it's showing one's own vulnerability. Started off on this journey, I realised that once I set this train running, there's no stopping. People will know the challenge that I went through personally in work and outside of work. But sometimes we have to be honest with ourselves. We have to show that vulnerability. We have to show that authenticity, that it's not out of a textbook what I've gone through. I've not written it. It's where I found myself. And it's sometimes we have to take that interest in people, not just within what they do in their personal lives or their professional lives. Let's create something around them. And I think just seeing the comment there around, this safe space, we should be able to create that safe space, home and at work. We need to create the environment where they can find that place to say the most goddamn hardest words ever, I need help. And to say, and to come back to them and say, that's absolutely fine. I'm listening to you, because for that 1 minute, I'm going to walk in your shoes. I'm going to feel what it's like, what you're going through. I'm going to show that you genuinely care. But not to be non-judgmental. No two people, even twins, are biologically not the same. And sometimes what we see on the outside, it may not be an accurate reflection of what that person's suffering on the inside. And I think, in football now, we want the best from our players, absolutely. But at what cost? Are they really struggling inside? Do we know how they're struggling? Is there certain telltale signs? Because we've talked about the conversation, but we can also understand sometimes that we may notice patterns in maybe their physical behaviour, some of their attributes or things that they say or they come out with that, do you know what? It just doesn't feel right. And sometimes we have to go with our gut instinct. We have to if something doesn't feel right, a lot of times it probably isn't right. And sometimes we just have to be inquisitive. No, it's not being nosy. No, it's not being intrusive. It's showing that you care. It's showing that genuineness. It's showing that sensitivity. It's showing that empathy, that as a fellow human being or person within your club, I am going to come and have that conversation. I am going to come and engage with it. I am going to try to get beyond the words. I'm fine. I'm going to ask those very, very open questions, because it puts my mind at rest that I've done as much as I can listen to that person and then hopefully help them in getting that guidance and that support. But we have to listen differently, and we have to act differently. We have to do it without assuming that we know what we think that person needs as to what they really, really, really need. And the only way we can go about doing that is conversation, is listening, is creating that safe space. It could be within a club, it could be in a society where they can go and have that safe conversation in absolute confidence. And I understand, we've talked about it before, what words do we use? How can I find the right words to say? And I've got time to go through all that today, but it's asking those open questions. It's getting uncomfortable, so we can then become comfortable that we can enter in that dialogue. And again, it's just trying to create that safe environment. But do we know who our support team is? And this might not be literally a support team. It could be on the periphery. It could be friends. It could be family. It could be people within your club. We all at times need a support team. We all at times need to know the people that we can lean on. I had to do it on that morning. And I split it down to four individuals. And these are the 4 people I use, maybe not on a regular basis, but I know to call upon. And I class one person, or one group, as my radiators. Who are the people that's got to give me that comfort, that I can go sound off, that will boost my confidence? We all want a bit of confidence in our professional lives. We want a bit of confidence on the football pitch. Who can I go speak to that will just boost my confidence? Who's not going to be critical of what I'm going through or what I've been through? As we fear of failure, and we have a fear of, failure is a bad thing. No, it's not. failure is a good thing. We learn from our failure. We learn from mistakes, be it on the pitch, off the pitch. We absolutely learn from that. So who is it that's got to give me that boost, that energy, that boost that I need at that point in time? And then who might be my role models? Who are the people that I admire? Who are the people that have achieved something who, you know, I can learn from? The people that I can get good, sound advice from. And again, it can be people in the club, outside of the club. And it's the people who can help you. Now, these people may be internal, external, but these are more around your wider network. Who are the people that I'm not just going to look at it insular around here and now within that space, within that club, within that organisation, or even within that family? Who is my wider network? Who maybe one day I do need that help. I need to put that help up. I need to put that help up without the fear of the stigma, the shame, the labels. But people show they'll be genuine, they'll be empathetic, they'll be sensitive to my need. That will give me that help and that guidance. And then I class my, what I call, no nonsense, I call them kicking the ass pant friends. The people who would tell it as it is, the sharp talking, the direct talking. And we all need that in times. We may not sometimes like it, but the people who will say it as it is, straight as a die, will say it as it is. And we need that. We need that sharp talk. We need some of that sharp guidance. So it's just a case of trying to identify, in the group, who is your support team? Do you have a support team? Can I put a support team in place that will allow me to create that give me that safe psychological environment that I can do the two most important things I may want to do one day? That's 2 steps, and 3 simple words. I need that help. But finally, we have to check in with our own well-being. And I mentioned at the very beginning, I didn't check in with my well-being. I had put on the mask of pretense. I chose to ignore the signs, the symptoms of what's creeping upon me because of, again, the stigma, the shame, etc. But we are no good to anybody. We are no good to anybody if we don't put that oxygen mask on ourselves first before we want to help and need to give that help to support to other individuals. And there's a great video I'm going to show now that is, whenever we get our mobile phones, it always tells us, I think it's about 20%, you need to plug your mobile phone in to charge you up. But how often do we plug ourselves in to charge ourselves up? Not literally, but how often do we look after our well-being? I didn't look after my well-being, and that nearly cost me my life. We have to look after our well-being. We have to demonstrate that behaviours, and behaviour breeds behaviour. If we start looking after our well-being, other people start doing that. And we've seen that during the pandemic, the importance of looking after our physical, mental and emotional well-being. And this video is just a good summary of some of those instant tips and techniques that I've just talked about. So hopefully this will work.
Every day we recharge our phones, but we forget to recharge ourselves. Let's just say we slept well the night before, which means we start our day with 100% charge. When we wake up in the morning, we roll over, and 80% of us check our smartphones before we brush our teeth. We scroll through social media, we browse through emails. That takes away 10% of our energy. Let's say we now have 90% charge left. We then commute to work. We spend our day in the office, in meetings, interacting with colleagues, finishing off projects and assignments. We now have 40% charge left. On the way home, we commute through traffic or on the train, and that takes away another, let's say 10%. We now have 30% charge left. We come home and switch on Netflix, talk to someone about what our day was like, and sometimes we lose another 10%. We now have 20% charge left. At 20% on our phones, usually the charge bar goes red. We get an alert. We get a message that tells us that we only have 20% battery left. The question is, do we notice when our charge is at 20% or 10%? There are always signs from our bodies, our brains, our minds. But are we tuned in? One of the best things we can do to recharge is to exercise. The hardest part of any workout is actually the 15 minutes leading up to it. We come up with 15 reasons why we don't want to sweat, and we change our mind 15 different times. CNN reports that when you work out, your brain creates more serotonin, which sends messages to your nervous system of happiness and well-being. Working out for 30 to 40 minutes every day can recharge our battery by 20%. Meditation is an incredible way to recharge our batteries. Exactly what the gym does for the body, meditation can do for the mind. Meditation gives us downtime, physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. Meditation also directly impacts your entire nervous system by reducing your body's productions of stress-related chemicals such as cortisol. Meditation is a great way to recharge and can take you back up 20%. We've all heard about incredible morning routines, but the one thing that can make a huge difference to your recharge is your evening routine. 35% of us are not getting the recommended 7 hours of sleep per night. Remember, every body and mind is different. Make sure you find the amount of time you need to get that serious battery recharge. And the 75-year study by Harvard found that beyond anything, the real sense check for happiness and meaning in life was relationships, connections, interactions with depth that are fulfilling and full of joy. Making time for deep, meaningful interactions every day can give the recharge our battery seriously needs. What if we've recharged ourselves as much as we recharge our phones? Because if we don't, we'll end up like one of our phones in the bottom of some drawer in our home.
I'm just seeing the comment around people like, how can you spot that it's creeping up? Is that we need to reach out? Sometimes we don't always we can't always spot that, but people around us might be able to spot that. That's why, again, creating that safe psychological environment. And I'm not saying here we have to be doing loads of meditation or go to gym and be, male athletes and etc. Bodybuilders. Absolutely not. It's just sometimes doing what the most important thing we can do. I didn't do it, and that's be kind to ourselves. Just realize the importance of our own mental, physical and emotional well-being. So hopefully you found that useful. Apologies for the technical difficulties we had at the beginning, but again, that's life. We don't live in a perfect world anymore, and obviously that's proved it tonight, but hopefully being able to take away something from this talk over the last 60 minutes or so. But thank you, and thank you, Danny, as well, for the invite.